Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today we are on the website of Amati Auctions based in the UK, and we're going to have a look at their affordable auction, which is live now and finishing tomorrow on the 18th of May. So as you can see, the first lot here has about 16 hours to go. So this particular auction is the affordable one, so stuff that might be trade instruments, things that need repair, or things which are kind of a bit of an unknown quantity as such. It looks like there's about 253 lots in this website. Buyer's premium for Terezio, as always, or as of recent times, is 22%. And like I said, this is a UK based sale. So if you're in Europe or anywhere else in the world, check out all the terms and conditions and import, export, any other fees, etc. etc. So without further ado, I think we'll just kind of crack on and have a look what we have, seeing as it's quite a lot of lots. I think most of these instruments are fairly tradey. It's one of the kind of more average auctions, but I only looked very quickly and I didn't look too much at any of the bows or anything. So let's have a look now and see what we can find. So first of all, we have a cello that's unlabelled. Because the bidding ends tomorrow, we can see that there's a fair bit of bids on things. Look at the kind of closed cracks and open cracks on that, so that's definitely an interesting one on that. But 2,200 the current bid, so it's likely to go up a bit more. As always, you can do the cool funky 3D viewer. Interesting back on that cello, but anyhow, definitely a curious one. A cello labelled Lutherie Artistique Claude Leblanc, current bid £10. Okay, interesting. We won't look too crazy on this, but it looks fairly standard. A cello labelled copy of Jacobus Steiner, £110 on that. This also looks like another standard type instrument. Cello labelled Made in Hungary, so it's another definitely a trade instrument there. It looks that kind of Hungarian type. Cello labelled the Apollo, Rushworth and Draper, £250 is the bid on that. Be another kind of trade import, possible soundpost crack on front. Doesn't, well, I mean, it needs a lot of repair, but the overall aesthetics not too bad. Cello labelled Companion, £375. It's the current bid, likely to be kind of low grade French. Ooh, and that was the only cellos there. So we've got a Viola unlabelled, current bid is 210. This looks just fairly standard. Another Viola unlabelled. Once again, looks fairly normal. £60 bid on that. Some interesting work on the F-holes, but a bit of an unknown one. A Viola labelled Anton Jays. I've got £70 bid on that. That's a bit more interesting than some of them. See what it says here. Looks like worm. Extensive woodworm damage throughout instrument. Yeah, you could see that a bit on the neck actually. I think if you look in this picture here, you see this, it's all woodworm there. And you can see it's just woodworm sitting. Shame really. Nice kind of interesting looking instrument there. That's it's a big job. Viola labelled Brian Philip Brearley, £170 is the current bid. Doesn't look too bad. Looks like it might have either just had its ground and not been finished from a varnish point of view, or it's been stripped or something, but it looks interesting. On to bows. Nickel mounted cello bow stamped KGP, current bid is £70. Nickel mounted cello bow unstamped, £110 is the bid. Nickel mounted cello bow unstamped, got a £70 bid. Nickel mounted cello bow unstamped, got a £10 bid. Unmounted cello bow stamped Bazar, £60. Silver mounted cello bow stamped Leffin, £220. Nickel mounted cello bow stamped Bazar. Bone mounted cello bow unstamped, £160 on that so far. Nickel mounted cello bow stamped Manufactum, £80 the bids. Silver mounted cello bow stamped Dodd, got £230 bid on that. Nickel mounted viola bow unstamped, £30 bid. Silver mounted viola bow unstamped, got 150 on that. Silver mounted violin bow stamped W.E. Hill and Sons, 650 bid on that. Let's have a look a bit more into that. Interesting. Yeah, not 100% sure about that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, 110 bid on that. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, you've got £90 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £60 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £40. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £10. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £30. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £30. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Otto Dolling, £130 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, got 130. Silver mounted violin bow unstamped, 120 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £30 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, got 40 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, got 80 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £40. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped. Really got quite a lot of pictures actually now on Amati. They're doing pretty well. 30 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £40 on this. Yeah, you can really see the entire bows now and everything. It's really good. I like that. Good photos. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped. You've got £40 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £30 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £80 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £50 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £30. Silver mounted violin bow stamped taut, £110 on that one. Child size nickel mounted violin bow unstamped. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Adolf Schuster, £90 bid on that. Missing its button. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £10 bid on that. An aluminium violin bow stamped John Gray, £10 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Ella Morizon, £90 is bid on that. Silver mounted violin bow stamped C.H. Pethold, a Paris, £40 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £30. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Lebert, £90 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Hopf, £30 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £40 on that. Silver mounted violin bow unstamped, 160 bid on that so far. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped H. Gerard, £30 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Adolf Schuster, £20 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £30. Nickel mounted violin bow unstamped, £10 on that one so far. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped P. Hell, 60 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped W. Seifert, £90 on that. Silver mounted violin bow stamped Taut, 120 on that one. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Viome, a Paris, 30 on that. Nickel mounted violin bow stamped Paul Jombard, £50. Nickel mounted bass bow stamped W.R. Schuster, £90 on that. Let's have a look at the head a bit more. Nickel mounted double bass bow stamped Tekla, £50 on that one so far. Bit of a condition report. Let's see what's going on here. So some wear and some missing bits. Oh, now we're on to violins. A violin labelled Copy de Jofredis Kappa. 250 is the bid on that. Nothing too outrageously exciting about that one. Violin unlabelled. 210. Once again, nothing too crazy. Violin labelled Thierry Paris. Once again, nothing too crazy. Violin labelled Robert A. Dolling. 170 bid on that one. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. 230 bid on that. Potentially looks a bit more interesting. Violin labelled copy of Antonio Stradivari. Definitely a pretty standard instrument, that one. Violin labelled Strad. Definitely a trade instrument on that. 3/4 size violin, JTL. We know these ones are pretty standard. Violin labelled Colin Mazza. Sure that's got a fair amount of bids. 240, yep. Violin faintly labelled. 110 on that one. Violin labelled Stoessa. £600 bid on that one, so that's a popular one. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Stradivari. Three-quarter size violin labelled London Violin Co. Doesn't look too bad. 120 bid. 3/4 size violin unlabelled. Yep. Violin labelled JTL and C. It looks like a pretty standard instrument there. Violin indistinctly labelled. For horrible button repair. So 3/4 size violin. Doesn't look too bad. A 3/4 size violin labelled M Quattro. Violin labelled Neuner and Hornsteiner. £700 on that. Yep, looks okay, but better than some of the other stuff we've seen so far. Violin unlabelled. £10 on that one. Violin labelled Stradivari. It's another generic kind of violin. Violin labelled Thomas Craig. 160 on this. Yeah. Violin unlabelled. Once again, pretty similar. A lot of these violins are not too exciting in this auction, unfortunately. Another violin here. Unlabelled, 150 is bid. Violin unlabelled. £10 bid on this one. Violin labelled made by John Lamb. 190 is bid on this. Interesting F holes. Violin unlabelled. Interesting back on that. It looks like a wave almost. It looks like go back to it. Looks like waves of the sea all coming. It's quite interesting. What's the bids on that? £30. So violin labelled Piacenza. £60 on that one. Violin labelled Stradivari. Violin labelled Stradivari again. Violin unlabelled, interesting kind of shape to that one. £10 bid on that. 3/4 size violin labelled Lewis Lowendahl, 70 on that. 3/4 size violin labelled Adolf Dorenzi. Quite nice back. Looks like the button is really off. Looks a bit off centre, but maybe it's just my eyes. 3/4 companion label violin. Violin unlabelled. Standard stuff. Another unlabelled violin. Yeah, more of the same. 3/4 unlabelled. Nasty crack to the head there. Violin labelled Carl Gottlob Schuster. Big crack there on the front. £30 is bid. Violin branded F. Pillemont Pear. What's the bids on that? 250. Violin labelled Wilhelm Herwig. It's a big nasty crack at the front. That's pretty horrible. Violin labelled Albert Schlegel. Quite luminous varnish. Violin labelled Nachman von Antonius Stradivari. Standard stuff. Violin unlabelled. More of the same. Violin labelled Scott Cowell, so it's probably a Chinese violin. I think the lower range of this 350 bid is kind of made in Canada, but I think the top end are actually made in America, I believe. Violin unlabelled, 110 bid. Yeah, it's slightly interesting, kind of older violin, might make a nice Baroque instrument. 3/4 size violin, labelled Jacobus Steiner, with the Steiner brand at the back. Violin unlabelled, interesting kind of F-holes. Got £20 bid on that. Violin inscribed 1929. Violin labelled repaired by Hawks and Sons. Interesting kind of violin. That's probably 425. The top is quite interesting on that actually. Probably one of the more interesting things. I've seen some bizarre stuff going on with this instrument. Yeah, some really weird stuff, but has some interesting parts to it. Violin labelled Sarasate, 210 on this. Violin labelled SH Dodd. I feel like I've seen this one before. Definitely a curious one. 110 on that. Violin labelled Copy de Francesco Gorbetti. Violin labelled LHF. Violin unlabelled in a kind of Baroque setup there. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled again. £20 current bid. Violin labelled Copy of Gio Paolo Magini, I presume. It's got the double purfling there on the body. Violin label John Baptist Schweitzer. This is your standard kind of violin of the kind of 19th century, late 19th century. Nothing to do with Schweitzer at all. Popular, imported quite a lot in the US. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Interesting kind of crackleture on the varnish, but that's probably the only interesting bit of it. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius again. Yep. Violin labelled Joe Betts. Interesting front to that. Curious looking instrument. £40 bid on that. What's the measurements of that actually? Body length 355. It's not too bad. Very narrow waist. It probably might not sound too good. 3/4 size violin. Violin labelled Degani. 275 is the bid on that. Curious head on that. Well, not sure what it is, but it looks a little bit different. Violin labelled the Maidstone. It's pretty standard stuff you see quite a lot in the UK. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Yeah, very horrible trade violin. Violin labelled Antonius Amati. It's another trade violin. Violin labelled Metro violin. Another horrible trade violin. Strad label. Interesting tailpiece on that one. Looks fairly kind of standard. Violin labelled model of Jakob Steiner. Just not too exciting. Violin unlabelled. Violin, copy of Stradivarius. Violin labelled Carlo Bergonzi. More trade violins. Violin labelled Gebaut Seftenberg. That's interesting. Interesting back. Looks like kind of amateur work. £10 on that. What's the length? About 359. Do like a good amateur violin. Violin labelled, manufactured in Berlin. Oh, quite cool back there actually. It's quite nice. Not too bad. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled or branded Nicolai Bertolini. Violin unlabelled. Violin branded Duke. £90 on that. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Stradivari. More of the same. Violin unlabelled. Big crack there on the F-hole. Yep, similar. Violin unlabelled. Interesting back. 110 bid on that. Violin branded Duke again. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled the Maidstone again. Violin stamped Duke. There's quite a few of these Duke stamped violins here. Violin unlabelled. Half-size violin labelled beer and feel. Interesting looking back on that. Violin labelled high design Piacenza. This is your standard kind of Chinese violin. Violin labelled SH Dodd. Another one of these Dodds. This one looks maybe a little bit more normal compared with the other one. £80 bid on that. Violin labelled Karl Kraus. Interesting. Kind of Magini-esque. Violin labelled Joseph Guarneris. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled H. Emile Blondelet. So, view of the front there. A violin labelled Charles Bovis. 700 bid on that. Quite interesting enough back on that. Half-size violin labelled Antonio Stradivarius. Violin labelled Carolus V. Dvorak. 110 on that. Interesting back. Slightly interesting scroll. And violin labelled Della Costa Pietro. Violin labelled Strad. Looks like the varnish has been fiddled about with on the front. Violin labelled WB Prince in a kind of Guarneri-esque thing. Violin labelled Guadagnini. Violin labelled Steiner. Violin unlabelled. Okay. Oh, it's got a lion's head. That's quite a nice line actually. That's not too bad carved line, to be fair. £60 on that. Bit of worm. Yeah, it's interesting enough. Let's have a look at the image view. That could make a nice kind of baroque instrument maybe for someone, or a kind of classical, like a kind of, you know, emergency classical, just a temporary fixing. But yeah, actually quite a nice line, to be fair, as these kind of tradey lines go. It's pretty good. Violin labelled Sebastian Klotz. Yeah, it's just the standard. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled. Half-size violin labelled Neuner and Hornsteiner. Violin labelled Aubry Dugard. Looks like that's been messed around with a bit. Violin unlabelled. That looks like a kind of Hopf style kind of thing. A bit dodgy looking. Violin labelled Francis Gobetti. That's 110 on the surface. Looks a bit more interesting. I wonder if we've seen this one before as well. It looks kind of familiar. It looks like it's on fire. Kind of like it in a weird way. But, yeah, definitely interesting. Curious. Violin labelled Stradivari again. Violin labelled copy of Stradivarius made by G. Patrick. Well, it could well be. It's that kind of slightly odd kind of shape and scroll and F-hole shape and placement, so it probably is true. Violin unlabelled. Three-quarter size violin labelled Maidstone. Violin labelled Stradivari. Violin labelled Excelsior. Violin labelled Robert Alton. Looks fairly amateurish work as well, but interesting, really nice back actually. Quite like that. What's the bidding on that so far? 220. Interesting. Another Strad labelled violin. A violin labelled Charles Brugiere. 350 bid on that. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Strad again. More of your trade violins. Violin faintly labelled. Violin unlabelled. Another violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled again. Violin labelled Jacques Bouquet. Violin labelled Carlo Antonio Testore. That looks like it's had some kind of really ultra low quality scroll put on it. Violin unlabelled. Just another trade violin. Violin Stradivari again. Violin labelled Louis Joly. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled. Another violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Longman and Broderick. 210 is the bid on that. Has potential. Violin labelled Maidstone again. So many of these Maidstone violins about. Violin unlabelled. This also looks a bit kind of Hopf-esque. It's got a line head, but that's a horrible line head. This tailpiece is quite nice actually on that. Violin labelled Jadius Klotz. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Violin labelled Stradivarius again. Slightly more interesting than some of the normal ones. £20 bid on that. What's the length of back on that? 359. Interesting. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled. Another Strad labelled violin. Another unlabelled violin. It's slightly curious. Some funny things going on with that. £10 bid. 3/4 size violin, unlabelled. Violin Stradivari label again. Actually quite interesting. Quite like the scroll on that. Shame we can't see a front view of the scroll. That would be interesting. Let's have a look at the sides. Curious. Violin unlabelled. Stradivari label again. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled. Three-quarter size violin labelled Joseph Klotz. An apprentice piece miniature cello. Okie dokie. It's an odd one, that one. 3 fractional violins. Nothing too exciting there. Another 3 fractional violins. Yeah, much the same. 2 fractional violins. I don't think there's anything much here either. Nope. 3 fractional violins. We're in the definitely fractional territory. These are all just really kind of not particularly nice trade violins. 2 banjos. There you go. Branching out, Amati. Something a bit different. Okay. 10 violin bows, various lengths. Okay. 6 violin bows, 1 cello bow, and 9 sticks, various lengths. Okay. 23 violin bows, 1 cello bow, and 7 sticks, various lengths. A few more images here. I really don't think there's anything at all good there. It looks all pretty junky. 23 violin bow sticks, 2 cello bow sticks, various lengths. "12 bows, various lengths. 20 violin bows, various lengths. 20 violin bows, various lengths. 20 violin bows, various lengths. Other 20 violin bows. I'm not too bothered about looking at the pictures on those. 3 violin bows, 12 violin bow sticks. Dictionary of Violin and Bow Makers there. Het probleem van den wielbow and strictinstrumenten. Okay. Italian violin makers there by Violas. Stradivari Legacy book. Universal Dictionary of Violin and Bow Makers. Monograph collections 1, 2, and 3. Les Violins. 2 indices books of musical luthiers from 1886 and 1896. Reproduction catalogue of the estate of J.B. Viome. 12-slot violin bow case. Violin case unbranded. Violin case branded Artemis. Violin case unbranded. Violin case branded W.E. Hills and Sons. Another violin case branded W.E. Hills and Sons. Violin case unbranded. Violin case unbranded. I think that's it. I think we've reached the limit. So there we go. This is the Amati catalogue, and this auction finishes tomorrow on the 18th. Being in all honesty, not the most exciting auction of recent times. Pretty much all fairly standard trade stuff, for a very occasional thing which kind of begged a second look and maybe slightly curious, but other than that, nothing too outrageous. But anyway, I'll put a link in the description. Check it out if you have the time, and thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao. Many thanks for tuning in to the Musical Instrument Investigator. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please like, subscribe and turn on notifications, and watch out for the next video coming soon.